Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Netreo webinar, which is focused today on better monitoring, and we're going to dive into some Netreo case studies. So I am Jed Caldwell. I am the Chief Revenue Officer at Netreo, and I have with me a guest speaker, James Mancini, who is our Principal Solution Architect and Co-founder of Netreo. We're going to take you through a pretty involved agenda today. I'm going to take you through the strategy for our organization, and a little bit about our philosophy on, monitoring, in general, and what we've been what we've been up to recently. And then I'm going to hand over to James, and James is going to take you through, some case studies, and then bring those case studies to life in the form of a platform demo. So let me start with, that first piece about enabling IT to transform, your business. So, our philosophy is really about a broad gamut from pre-production right the way through to operational production. So think about IT as an enabler from the moment you design right the way through to when you're running things in production. And the way that we see that is our customers are going through journeys, and those journeys are effectively transforming them from their current state to their desired state. So we have some organizations that are doing cloud first transformations. We have some organizations that are consolidating technologies, consolidating data centers, and we have a lot of organizations that are really bridging the gap between old and new technologies. So they're really hybrid environments. And so what our customers are doing to really be as competitive as they can be is to work out how to do that in the most efficient way. And one of the aspects of completing that transformational journey is really understanding the as is and the to be state. And the way Netreo attacks this and helps our customers on that journey is provide kind of peace of mind both pre and post production to answer the questions about how do you get control of such a complicated IT transformation. And then once you have control, what do you do after that? How can you understand the end state environment dynamically, and then be able to act when things are changing. And and at the end we'll talk a little bit about the organization and why we were formed. But let me start with that first piece, that digital transformation piece. So we kind of see this as a bit like an F1 team. So if you think about production and an actionable insight as the race, getting prepared for that race is absolutely critical. So for an F1 team, it's about taking a vision, really understanding what the car needs to be designed like, what is that perfection and ideal state when they're in a race. And then in the run up to through designing the car, creating it, understanding what needs to be done, you have a team around you that are understanding every aspect of the car, every aspect of the vehicle as you're designing it, testing it pre-race and pre-production, understanding all the tweaks that you need to make it as perfect as it can be before it hits the race, because obviously it's incredibly expensive to fix something if something breaks during a race. And requires perfectly timed, accurate, precise answers, both in the design phase, in the testing phase, and then also in the actual race. So and whilst that data is coming in, and whilst it's live, and your business is running at an incredible speed, getting control and understanding how to cut through the noise and get into actionable data is incredibly important. So everything on that car during a race, for example, needs to be monitored. So if you're not monitoring with different teams that have a specialist capability in certain areas, like the treads on the tires, you're not going to get to win in the race, and therefore in your respective market. So that's kind of how we see an ideal state on the demands on a typical business. And if we take that forward there's an incredibly complicated world out there, but in that complicated world, the customer experience for us is absolutely everything. The ability to dynamically understand how to react when your business is changing, whether it's market changes because of a pandemic, or whether it's adoption of new technology or mergers and acquisitions. The customer experience throughout that whole process is incredibly important for you to remain competitive as a business. And then as we move forwards, that customer experience then kind of helps you define how you deliver your products and services to your customers. So if we move on to the next slide, James, just saying thank you. What we think about is in a complicated environment where we're trying to drive the best customer experience, what we think about is it's more about the and than the or. So most of our customers have complicated environments. Most of our customers are not making a choice about do I go on-prem, do I go cloud, do I host things, do I consume via SaaS, do I have server or serverless environments? In most of our customers, it's really about both. And it's really about, as those choices are changing, how can we support, both, whether it's on the full stack kind of infrastructure side, right the way through to, complicated applications that are revenue generating for you and your organization. So how do you really, get control of that complexity? So we see it as, in a complicated environment, you have a number of personas. And if you think about this as the left-hand side is kind of the pre-race or development side, and the right-hand side is the race itself and operational side, that entire journey that I articulated with the F1 team, in IT, translates into the developer communities and making sure that they can produce the best code that they can possibly produce, both on their individual desktops and laptops, and also when they're checking in centrally. It's understanding how DevOps teams can really understand what's coming out the development organization, what's getting through the CI/CD process and then into production, and then having those SREs, the site reliability engineers, to help bridge that gap between doing things the right way so that you're driving effective change management. You're really thinking about performance both pre and post production, and you're thinking about all the complicated things that will happen to the applications and the code that you're developing when it gets rolled into production. And then on a production side, for us, it's really about all of the complicated infrastructure and applications and and data centers and multi-cloud that you need to really get control of. And how do we really monitor all of that in production? How do we make sure we have the right view, the right actionable insight, the right technology for the right role at the right time, whether you're a command and response centralized IT, whether you're running a NOC, whether you're an engineer and architect, or whether you're just a manager and you need to have the right reports so that you can really understand what you need to do next to effectively remediate any problems you see in production. And we want to try to provide the technology and the capability that helps cut all the noise out of all of the problematic things that each one of those roles has to face every day. And that brings us on to trying to supply a taming of that chaos, if you will, because it can be very complicated. There are so many vendors that IT organizations have to kind of plug together, whether it's Microsoft or Cisco or lots of other different kinds of vendors, multi-cloud, Azure, AWS, GCP, lots of complications. So how do you sift through the noise, tame the chaos, and get to answers, not problems? So how we do that today is we brought together two portfolios. 1 month ago, we acquired a company called Stackify. So as we were building out that vision I talked about And one of the things that we were looking for is, that DevOps agenda, that pre-production, best in class, monitoring. And, we found that in Stackify. And then in a traditional, Netreo, portfolio, we've been doing full stack monitoring for, 21 years, and Stackify has been, doing, pre-production DevOps application, monitoring and management for the best part of a decade. And the philosophy of both organizations was exactly the same. It was about, how do I bring best-in-class tools to save time for the 6 personas we just talked about, so that we can bring them tools that make their job easier, help them do the right thing every day, so that they can cut out all the noise in the work. If they're a developer, how do they work out where the problems are, tracing through their code? How do they understand where errors and logs are coming through when they're testing their code, and bringing all of that together in one place, rather than having lots of tools that they have to have in their environment to get control of. And similarly in production with the traditional Netreo platform, doing all of that for network teams and server teams and application managers, and making sure the right team is working on the right problem at the right time, and you're not wasting time of multiple groups, and doing all of that in such a simple way, with as much automation as we can possibly bring to bear. And for us, this brings together multiple opportunities for our customers that are really challenged with both of these sets of personas, and really trying to understand how to unify that experience from dev right the way through to ops. So we spent a lot of time kind of thinking through how we do that the right way, and bringing these two organizations together is really our ideal state. So as we move forward, one of the things that the unification of these platforms is bringing to bear is our philosophy on how to approach, how to do monitoring and management the right way, both pre and post production. The first thing is observe, which is really understand everything that's going on in your environment, from foundational physical and virtual infrastructure right the way up to what is the business impact of this particular outage on a business service that you're offering. And often our customers are using us in critical environments for revenue generating services. So an understanding of that entire environment is critical for our customers. And how do we automate the collection, the topology, the building, and the information and trending information over time, of all of the different kinds of infrastructure and applications that you have, in IT. And then once we've got that foundation and observe, we move into analyze. And what analyze then allows us to do, with that foundational data, with multi-years worth of trending, with our machine learning engine, with an approach with AI ops, on top. It's really marrying, the data with a library of actionable workflows, if you will, to take all of the common things that generally you need to help to remediate, and using an intelligent engine to work out what the right action is to the right problem with the right group of IT capabilities at the right time. And then once that understanding, once that analytics has been done, we then move into, how do I actually then action what I need to get done? Do I need to automatically action something so it automatically tunes your monitoring environment? Do I need to action something to automatically take a configuration of an IT asset that has got out configuration back to its desired state? Or do I need to inform somebody that there is an action that we recommend that they should be performing, but there needs to be a manual step as part of your process in order to action? And how much can we make easy? How much can we make dynamic? How much can we allow the tooling to not just have as many things out of the box to execute on as possible from an automation perspective, but also have the ability to build those kind of automations, on the fly. And James will take you through, some of that in the demo a little bit later. So when we move forward, from ACT, we then, bring those two portfolios together and really, enrich this observability stack from, some of the traditional physical and virtual aspects and multi-cloud aspects that we manage in the Netreo platform, and then unifying things that are common in things like, digital experience management, to not just have, a passive synthetic view, but also have an active real user monitoring view of, applications and how they run, both pre and post production. So really helps our customers enhance the ability to execute when they are running things both pre and post, production. And then when you bring those kind of 6 personas that we talked about earlier into the DevOps life cycle, on the left hand side we split the developer or the DevOps teams into two, and Retrace is really for the centralized kind of build and test groups, bringing together code into applications that you're going to roll into production. And Prefix is for the individual developers that are writing the code that they're checking in centrally into the into the central environment with Retrace. And then as you take those through into production, then marrying that with the Netreo platform to really give you a full end-to-end experience for all of the personas that are mentioned at the bottom of this slide. So an incredibly full capability set that we've been kind of developing and enhancing in our build plans to bring these two organizations together. So we're incredibly excited about where we are, and we're really starting to bring our customers to learn about the other side of the portfolio. And of course now for people that are looking for full stack end-to-end DevOps into production monitoring capabilities, we can now offer that with a single vendor in a very simplistic approach. So we're incredibly excited about where we are today and what we're bringing to bear. So when you bring those two portfolios together, you really end up with the philosophy at the top, which is how do we think about our vision, the single source of truth, visibility for the whole team in very contextual way to the person that's utilizing the technology, understanding that person, what actionable insights they can gather from all of this information being brought together in a single platform, and then automating as much of a response as you possibly can. And of course, integration with third parties is really important here, like centralized ITSM platforms, for example. So when you bring those two platforms together, you can see a lot of the critical capabilities that we're bringing to bear. And really what it's all about is bringing the best user experience that we can possibly think about to our customers, given that end-to-end full comprehensive observability, understanding how to get to value quickly, understanding the impact of that fast time to value, because ultimately it reduces IT costs, and then that overall TCO is lowered because the technology is taking care of a lot of it for you. So that really gives you kind of an idea of our philosophy and really what we care about in terms of helping our customers have confidence to perform when they get to run their applications and infrastructure in production. And with that, I'm going to hand over to James to really start to take you through a handful of case studies and then a demonstration of the platform. So James, with that, over to you.
All right, thanks, Jed. So I'm going to go through some of the case studies for some customers for whom we were able to solve some really interesting monitoring problems and kind of talk about the benefits that they got from that, and then walk through the demonstration, as Jed said. During that process, if you have questions or if things come up you'd like some additional detail on, please feel free to enter them in the questions section of the GoToWebinar interface, and we will be happy to address those when we get to the end of the session here during the Q&A. So this first customer is a large healthcare provider and hospital network located in the northeastern United States. And The problems that they were facing were that they had too many different tools and no real central command center visibility into all of the different areas of the environment. So they were starting to run into issues with their centralized tool having scaling challenges and not really giving them the reporting that they need. But all of these different tools were resulting in finger pointing between the different teams. So for example, a ticket would come in, it would get assigned to the database team. The database team would then hand that ticket off to the networking team, who'd hand it off to the storage team, who'd sometimes hand it back to the database team. Before the actual problem got resolved, they were kicking issues around a fair bit between the different teams because nobody really had visibility of the entire system. They could only see their own little section. And so the database team would look at that and say, well, everything's fine with the database. This must be a network problem. And network would look at it and say, well, actually, the network's fine, but it looks like you might have issues with storage. And these sorts of things would really slow down their time to resolution and really drag out the time to finding the root cause and starting to fix the actual problem. And of course, part of this was, being able to manage the costs associated with managing all of those different tools and buying all the maintenance and updates and all the training that's required for all of those different platforms together. So when we implemented in their environment, we were able to displace over 30 different network monitoring systems that they were running on a total of 40 different servers and consolidate that into a single server cluster. And get that deployed in their environment for over 25,000 devices within 90 days. A big part of the way we were able to do that is through a lot of the automation that Jed talked about, and through being able to automatically onboard new devices as they're discovered and apply all the right settings to them, which is something I'll show you a little bit later in the demo. As a result of that, they were actually able to measure that their root cause detection time went down by 83%, and their overall MTTR went down by almost half. And we were able to get the time required to bring those new devices on from days or even sometimes weeks, because of all the different platforms they had, down to minutes, so that they could be automatically detected and brought into monitoring. It also allowed them to cut their IT tools budget by 60%, with 75% fewer full-time employees dedicated to tools management. So they were able to redeploy engineers into roles where they could make a more positive impact on the overall company, instead of being forced to just care and feed for the tools that they had. This allowed them to reach a 45% reduction in total operating costs during the first year, and by more than 75% by year 3. So they got an immediate payback and return on investment for the system that they were able to implement, as well as making lives a lot easier for their IT staff. Now, this second example is a national railway network in Europe. So it's a whole country's worth of railways. And this particular customer had some complex network topology issues. Because they're operating physical infrastructure, they had multiple air-gapped and secure enclave networks that they needed to be able to monitor. And their federal government had imposed very strict reporting requirements on what they had to report, how they had to report it, and they didn't want to have to constantly be managing and updating these reports as they brought on new infrastructure. So they needed a simplified way to handle that. They also had the requirement that because their IT staff was fairly small and really kind of overburdened, they wanted to be able to fully automate the process of bringing those devices on board and getting them into management. So they wanted to be able to detect a new device when it came in, get it completely configured, put in all the right reports without ever having to touch the management platform. And we were able to deliver that solution for them. By installing into their environment, using a distributed network of collection systems, we were able to monitor those secure enclave networks in a secure way that let them centralize all the visibility without having to open up a lot of different openings in firewalls and violate their secure enclave policy. It also allowed them to leverage our template-based reporting system, so that when they wanted to make a change to the format of a report, they could change the master template and have that automatically change dozens or hundreds of reports on all of the different segments that they had to issue those reports on, and to then deliver those reports automatically to meet those government reporting requirements. As a result of that, they were able to achieve that zero-touch onboarding model, get new devices into the system without ever logging into the portal, without any operator intervention. And we were able to get them into full production within 90 days of deployment, again, through leveraging that automation functionality, and being able to really plug into their environment in a way that didn't require them to deploy agents, didn't require them to manage those connections, but could just leverage the manufacturer's built-in APIs so that they could meet those reporting requirements and not have to add additional tasks to their staff. Now, this third example is a large supermarket chain located in the southern United States, and they had a very high-tech environment. Considering the size of the environment, and most people think of grocery stores as being very analog, they're actually extremely highly technologically advanced. There's an enormous amount of technology that goes into managing those stores and the networks that run them. So their challenge was they had a lot of different NMS tools. They again wanted to consolidate into a single view for all of the different teams so that when a problem occurred, all of the teams could see the problem, but the alerts would only get routed to the teams that needed to take action on those problems. So they weren't wasting a lot of time with parallel troubleshooting. If you're using 5 or 6 different monitoring systems and they all generate an alert at the same time because the database says there's a problem and the storage says there's a problem and the network says there's a problem and the server monitoring says there's a problem, the application monitoring says there's a problem, all of those different teams start jumping around trying to figure out how to troubleshoot those problems in parallel, when in reality, probably only one or maybe two of them at most really need to be involved. So being able to get centralized visibility where they had a shared source of truth between all the teams, but still have dedicated dashboards so that the teams felt like they had their own tool. They didn't feel like they'd been forced to use a tool that wasn't well suited for them. They could have their own customized views, but they were all sharing that single source of truth, so they had global visibility to the entire IT stack. We were able to implement this solution for them and get all of their different devices onboarded into the system quickly. And also, as a bonus, we were able to automate a lot of their network configuration changes. Whereas previously they had been doing a lot of changes manually and didn't have a good tool to manage their network configurations, that functionality is built into our platform. So they were able to easily leverage that and take advantage of that functionality to save a lot of man hours. Now, when we implement it in their environment, not only were we able to cut down their resolution time and their time to root cause detection, as well as doing things like automating their configuration management policy, so that it can be a fully automated system. Whenever a configuration is detected out of compliance, it can automatically be forced back into compliance with automated scripted responses. They actually ran a time and motion study on their engineers and found that by switching to our platform from the collection of tools they were using before, they managed to improve their engineer efficiency by 77%. They were also able to reduce their training budget for IT staff by 98%. In fact, our entire solution was implemented in their environment for less than the annual training costs of one of their previous products that they'd been using. As in the process of that, we integrated with their ITSM systems like ServiceNow so that we could automate the ticket creation process. And their average ticket creation time went down from 4.5 minutes, where they had an operator have to figure the problem out and code all the data into the ticket, to under 10 seconds, when we can just push all of that information directly into the ticketing system on demand or fully automatically if desired. Now I'm going to take just a second here to transition over and hop into the platform itself. Our platform is entirely web-based, so it's designed so that as you access the platform, whether it's SaaS hosted or whether it's on-premise, there's no separate client that has to be installed. There's no remote controlling a server to make changes, or running a separate reporting program. The web interface is designed so that all of the functions, from dashboarding to real-time troubleshooting to scheduled reporting and administrative functions, are all built into the same user interface, which simplifies those training requirements. And when you log into the platform, most teams are going to log into a custom dashboard that's been assigned to their particular user. So that might be a network focused view for the network folks. It could be a server or an application focused view for those folks. These dashboards can all be created with a very simple drag and drop interface. So there's no SQL or scripting required to build these dashboards, which also reduces the time to get these into production and get them in front of the users and the engineers that really need them. It can also be things like a high-level executive view that's focusing more on SLAs and overall application visibility, at a very high level, so that your C-level executives can also have a dedicated view into the environment. But it's simplified enough that they don't have to really understand your naming conventions or know which load balancers are delivering what applications. That can all be translated for them into a method that they can easily say, "Hey, is there a problem with my e-commerce sites right now?" and get that information delivered in a way that they can easily digest it. If you haven't got a custom dashboard assigned, you're typically going to land in what we call the consolidated view. And the consolidated view sort of rolls up all of the different areas of IT that we might be managing for a given customer environment. As Jed mentioned, it's designed to be full stack, so it covers everything from network device configuration change detection to traffic analysis, application breakdown, top volume, top conversations across the environment. It includes things like synthetic application testing, so we can monitor those web applications or those SaaS applications that we're delivering out to our users. And we can do that at a granular level. We can monitor from, internal applications. We can monitor from outside to public facing applications. And we can even monitor from inside out to cloud applications as well and integrate all that information in together. So for example, if I'm making extensive use of hybrid Exchange environments, I can quickly drill in through my Microsoft Exchange 365 Insight. I can go in and see exactly what's being monitored for the Exchange environment, see the response time from all of my different locations to that Exchange environment, so I can quickly get notified about anomalies or slowdowns, and even run things like synthetic mail checks through the system. So I can check the full cycle of sending mail out into the internet, getting it back in, going through all of my various processing and filtering, things like antivirus or content filtering systems, so I can get notified about a slowdown with any of those kind of different functions and see that very quickly and easily. And any of these, of course, can generate automated actions. So our event-driven automation allows us to use things like notification actions, so I can send out messages or notify folks when a particular problem is happening by email or SMS, or even by push directly to our dedicated mobile application for iOS or Android. But I can also script responses. So I can have active response actions run against, for example, my server infrastructure to restart services, or execute really any kind of command that you can automate with PowerShell or with SSH, to be able to kind of get that first line remediation built in for all of the different functions in the environment. And the system itself is designed to allow you very quick access to the data. So it's designed so that whenever there's a problem in the environment, I can quickly drill in to see exactly what the cause of that problem is and what devices are affected. I can pull up any amount of collected history for these metrics. And by default, we store the last 3 years of history for most of these metrics and the last 100 days at the highest resolution. So you've always got detailed information that you can use to see exactly what was happening at a particular moment in time. But that also gives us the detail that we need to be able to run anomaly detection, where we're applying machine learning algorithms to the data itself to look for patterns. So we can find things like unusual behavior based on time of day or day of week. And you can get notified about unexpected changes in the environment. Like, for example, if your SQL server is normally running at 60% on a Thursday at 11 a.m., but today it's running at 15%, that's the sort of anomaly in the environment that would be very difficult to detect with a conventional threshold network management system, but that anomaly detection can really highlight. And that problem might represent something gone wrong in the application. It could represent something breaking in the front end that's impacting and not getting the orders into the SQL system. And being able to quickly hone in on those problems is one of the big advantages of leveraging that artificial intelligence technology to sort through the data for you. But we can also go in and do manual human intelligence analysis of the data to look for correlations, for example. So if I want to look at, one particular metric that I might be affected by other metrics, I can pull as many metrics up as I like, all on the same screen, and link them all to the same time period and get very quick access to see if there are trends or relationships between this data that I should be concerned about. And these are, again, designed to be interactive, so I can zoom in on a particular data point, or I can activate or deactivate specific metrics if I need to zoom in on what's going on those. But we also give you the flexibility to take this view, and if it turns out to be useful, I can save it as a favorite, so I can jump back to this with a single click, or I can even automate this as a report with just a couple of clicks. So I can send this out right now as a PDF. I can add this as a new page to a custom report I've already created, or I can make a new custom report starting with this page and then send it out to any number of recipients daily, weekly, or monthly. So the idea is we're trying to empower our customers to even get away from the need for reactive alarms. Reactive alarms are great when something happens that you need to take care of very quickly, but it's a very interrupt-driven and inefficient way to work if all you're doing is processing alerts all day long. So, rather than getting a notification when a hard drive gets to 95% and you need to go do something about it to keep that server from going over, that's great. Everybody does that. We can even automate a response to that. So you could go in and log into that system with PowerShell and have it automatically clear out the temp directories or flush the caches to try to recover it. But an even better way is if instead I can just make the process of getting the data out simple enough that every morning I get a a picture of what my most used drives are across all of the different systems that I'm monitoring. And I can take that data, and I know if I fix the top couple entries on that list every day, I don't have to get woken up in the middle of the night. I can actually go and sleep through the night because I've proactively fixed those problems before they could impact my users. So I can go in here and adjust this report to the data that I want to get, filter that out, have it generated from the database in real time, and then just automate the sending of that report with just a couple of clicks. So now I've got that report and that data sent out to the people that need it, and I don't have to wait for that alarm to happen. I'm now fixing problems proactively and addressing them before they can really impact users. One of the other functions that we build into the platform is the ability to monitor these platforms without the use of agents. So we leverage the APIs that are built into the systems to get deep information from the systems themselves. So for example, when I'm monitoring a Windows system, very often in a Windows environment, most monitoring platforms are going to monitor 5 to 10 metrics on those systems, including looking at disk, memory, CPU, maybe some service status. But that doesn't give you a complete picture. Even if I get an alarm that says, hey, the CPU on the system is spiked, I really need to be able to tell why that's happening. So we don't license or limit you to the number of elements that can be watched on a system. And as a result, we can get a much clearer picture of what's going on in that system. So for example, in a Windows environment, we typically monitor between 150 and 250 metrics for each of those systems. So I can not only look at my overall CPU utilization, for example, but I can also look at it per core to find problems with single-threaded processes, or even find configuration issues in my virtualization environment that might be slowing things down. I can combine those metrics with metrics coming from my virtualization environment, so I can see what the virtualization environment is reporting as utilization for those different systems is as well. But we also go deeper. We learn all the processes running on that system, and we track the CPU and memory utilization for every single one. So when something unusual happens in the environment, I can quickly drill in to see exactly what process was it that suddenly started using up a lot more resources than is typical for that system. So now I've not only answered why there's a CPU spike, but I've got a really good lead into going in and resolving the source of that particular problem. And all of this data can still have that anomaly detection applied to it as well. So when there is something that unusually happens in the environment, or something changes how much memory it's using, for example, to an amount that's unusual for that date or time, we can be proactively notified about that, or take reactive actions like sending out notifications, or even logging in and running PowerShell scripts to mitigate the problem, or even just to dump diagnostics on what might be going on within a particular process or system or a database. The tool itself builds in a lot of other functionality as well, including things like real-time command execution and the ability to create maintenance windows based on groups. So the idea is that as I go through my environment and create maintenance windows, I can build a schedule for when systems are going to be unreachable and assign that by grouping. So now, as I find new devices in the environment and they get added to this group, they inherit all those maintenance window settings, which further limits the amount of administrative overhead that I have to apply to managing these systems. And the neat part is that by controlling this with those groups and then applying those groups automatically to newly discovered devices, we can even further reduce the admin overhead involved. So we call this device lifecycle management. And the idea is that we're constantly looking for new devices in the environment that we can manage. So we're looking to discover those devices through network scanning, through integration with things like your virtualization console, Hyper-V or vCenter, for example, or your cloud providers like AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud. It can even link into things like your ServiceNow CMDB to learn devices that way, or plug into your SD-WAN providers to learn things as you deploy them there. And as it finds those devices, it moves into an interrogation process where it'll actually go through and see if we already know any credentials that will work to manage these systems. If we find working credentials, it moves into what we call auto configuration, which is a series of rules. And a bunch of these come with the system. We usually build a bunch out as part of our turnkey installation services, but you can also edit and customize these. And at a real simple level, they're learning things about devices and then applying settings based on those discoveries. So for example, if I find a Windows service named SQL on this particular system, I want to put it into my database servers category. It's a pretty basic idea, but it allows you to take all of the different parameters that we're learning about the system, like what it's named, whether it's running BGP, what services might be running on it, what ports it's listing on, or even what subnet it's located on. and using that to apply these organizational units that drive all of my dashboards and reports, and that can drive things like my maintenance window automation. So all those settings can be automatically applied to the systems as they're brought into the environment. But then it also lets me use those organizational methods to drive a series of templates. And we handle templates a little bit differently than most products in this category. So normally what you'd have is you'd have a Windows template, and then when you wanted to have an Exchange template, for example, you'd copy the Windows template and add Exchange stuff to it. And then you'd copy the Windows template again to add SQL stuff to it. And you end up with a large number of these templates, none of which are quite exactly the same because they depend on when they were copied from the master template. And harmonizing all of these and making sure you're not ending up with missed alerts or getting false alarms is really time consuming and basically impossible to do manually. So instead, the approach we took was to have a default template that could be applied to all of the devices that were the Windows type, where I can control all of the basic alerts that I want. But then if I'm running other things on those systems, I can layer other templates on it, different layers. So now my SQL template is separate from my basic Windows template, and it can extend or even modify the settings that are coming from my Windows template. So in addition to the SQL specific things I might want to monitor, I can also do something like go in and change my CPU utilization thresholds. So I'm getting fewer alerts on these systems because they tend to run hot. I can change the way we're watching CPU or disk utilization and reduce those false alarms. And by layering all of these different settings on it, different layers, and making sure they all get applied to the devices automatically, that's how we get to that zero touch onboarding model where I found a device automatically, I bring it in, determine what it's running, what software is on it, apply all of the right settings, put it in all the dashboards and on all the right reports, and then it goes on its merry way as a monitored device, and I haven't had to touch a thing. And then we give you tools that will empower you to tune these settings. So for example, the baseline template report will quickly show me which templates are responsible for most of the alerts that I'm seeing, and I can drill in to see what setting in these templates might be misconfigured that's generating those alarms and sending out more notifications than I really want it to. Now, if I don't have time to manually go in and tune these templates, that's where the AI ops functionality comes in with something we call autopilot, which looks at the configuration of my monitoring platform on an ongoing basis, sees how it's interacting with the devices in the environment, and then can make recommendations for things that could be fixed easily. So I can go in here and apply those recommended fixes with just a button click. Or I can ignore problems if I'm doing them by convention. I knew about that, did it on purpose. I can ignore that, take it out of the list, and it'll stop processing it and teach the AI to look for fewer things like that in the future. But I can also then empower it to run some of these fixes autonomously. So if I've got changes that I know I can safely apply in my environment without impacting my change control, I can go in and create those as fully automatic solutions that can be applied. So the system becomes self-tuning and self-healing and tries to keep itself in tune with the environment. So if it finds things where, hey, this device has got interfaces that I'm not collecting data on because they got added later, we can automatically correct and dynamically fix those problems on the fly. Or if it's a threshold that's generating too many alerts, it can go in and automatically adjust those threshold levels for me if I want it to. And all of that functionality is, of course, available in a number of different visualizations. So I can go in and create my own customized geographic maps where it'll automatically create and update my sites based on where they're located in the world. It'll automatically figure out based on the address where they need to be drawn on the map. And if there's a lot of them, it can cluster them together for me and allow me to quickly zoom in on what's going on at a particular location. So there's a lot of flexibility in how we're displaying this data so that you can really present customized views to each of those different personas that might need to use a product like this and really might take advantage of it. So we're running a little short on time, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this back over to Jed to wrap it up here for us. And if you have any questions, do feel free to enter them in the web GoToWebinar interface, and we'll make sure to address them here at the end. Jed?
Okay, great. Thank you, James. So in terms of questions, I think we'll see if we can get to it at the end. But let's have a quick wrap up on the company itself. So, I mentioned earlier on, we've been in business now collectively for just over a couple of decades. Every day we have over 20 million applications, devices, and resources under management with our customers. We operate in 60 plus countries with more than 1,400 customers, and we pretty much cover every major industry, and on the major development shop side with software houses and that kind of organization, right the way through to very highly regulated and scalable organizations and industries, including things like, air gap networks and highly secure kind of government customers. And then, our scope for monitoring management really covers, full stack, as we've mentioned, throughout the presentation. Your consumption is either SaaS-based or on-prem, full native, multi-cloud. We have a, mobile access as well for accessing, from any device, anywhere. And James kind of alluded to our, rapid onboarding, methodology to try to really implement and get our customers up and running to, first meaningful use, as quickly as we possibly can. Our management team is from, pretty broad but very strategic background from, PwC and Cisco, but also, AWS, eBay, Micro Focus, etc. And then we've got a partner network that really spans, the world, whether that's integration work or implementation work, or just local work, in a particular location around the planet. And of course, we also spend a lot of time with analysts. One of the primary things that we care about is our customers providing viewpoints, on our behalf and rating us on public sites. So, we operate on, sites like G2 Crowd and Capterra and very specifically, Gartner Peer Insights. We've got a lot of work with those over the last several years, and you can see the kind of accolades and and scores that we've got on those websites, and they're all live, so you can go and kind of review that for yourselves. I think with that, James, I'm gonna wrap up, and we're gonna move to our poll. So if each one of you could please respond to the poll before you exit. But thank you very much on behalf of myself and on behalf of James for attending the webinar today. The recording will also be available shortly afterwards and posted on our website so that you can share it with colleagues. And thank you so much for attending today, and looking forward to speaking to you post this webinar. We have no questions, James, in the poll, so I think we can wrap it up very neatly. Thank you all.
Excellent. I'm going to give the poll here just a few seconds to complete. So if you haven't clicked off, please select an option there if you'd like to. And thanks everyone for your time, and we'll talk to you soon, I hope.
Thank you, James. Thanks, everyone.